Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Imperfect Podcast. I'm your host, Kirsten Pfeiffer, and today I am joined by Kristen Dalton Wolfe. Kristen is a former Miss USA who helps women step into the radiance of their true identity. She has used her passion for women, coupled with her degree in psychology, to launch She Is More, which is a faith blog to spread the truth that every woman is royalty. Kristen and her husband, Kris Wolfe, are based in Los Angeles and run men and women's ministries, which is actually how I met Kristen, was through her ministry. They also run retreats and conferences and speak regularly in churches, events, and at universities. Kristen is also a TV host with her own nationally syndicated show, and she's the author of Rise Up, Princess, 60 Days to Revealing Her Royal Identity, Rise Up with God, The Guided Journal, and The Sparkle Effect. More than that, Kristen is just such an incredible human being and a friend, and I'm just so honored to have you here. So welcome, Kristen.
Yay! Thanks for having me. I haven't heard that bio in so long. I'm like, wow, I need to update that bio.
Well, it's funny because whenever I have guests on, I feel like such a stalker because I just search the web and put together and try to also infuse my own twist, knowing you and noticing the things you've done. But
you're sitting there watching someone talk about you, and you're like, this is embarrassing.
No, it's not. Thanks. But you're amazing. And like I said, Kristen and I met through her and her husband's ministry. But I would love, it's fun for me to say it in my words, but tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and just your heart for what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you talk about my ministry, and I felt, I run a women's ministry in Los Angeles. It's called She Gathers, and that started out of my house. I started a women's group. And that really came from actually my blog, She Is More, that you're talking about. I started the blog, She Is More, that really just comes from that Bible verse, she is more precious than rare jewels. So the whole thing is about your identity and your worth and your value. And that passion came from my own walk with God. I'm a former Miss USA, and I was raised as a woman of faith, and I was raised knowing Jesus, but it wasn't until after I was Miss USA and moved to Los Angeles that someone said to me for the first time, Kristen, don't you know that you are a daughter of the King?
Wow.
And my whole world turned upside down. And it was a guy who said it to me. So I do just want to say that men are powerful in our life, and they have the power to speak. Wow. I just feel like men get so much flack these days. And so it's no, we need powerful men. So anyways, that really just turned my world upside down. And I was like, wow, what does it mean to be God's daughter? This means that I'm royalty. This means that I don't have to operate for victory or validation. It means that I get to operate from it. And what would it be like if every single woman knew that? How would she live differently?
Wow.
How would she think differently? How would she act differently? What would she tolerate? What would she not tolerate? You know? And so that just became my passion. I was living out here in Los Angeles doing the whole modeling commercial work thing and really successful in all of it. And the more I grew in my relationship with God and started stepping into purpose, the more the entertainment industry doors just started closing as far as how they provided my income.
Wow.
And I was like, God, I thought that since I'm a faithful daughter, you're going to provide for me and open up these opportunities. And it was no, he was kind of closing those doors. So I would step more and more into calling, so yeah.
It's amazing.
I'll stop there so we can
No, that's incredible. Well, this is I want you to keep speaking and this is why I want you to have you on here, because you're so, everything you share is just resonates so much with me, and I know will resonate with a lot of people. And I think especially in this town and pursuing a career in entertainment, that's my background. And it's funny because God has put this dream on my heart from a young age, and it was the doors weren't opening right away. And then that made me question well, did you really call me to do this? And in that process, I had a really cool thing this last week where it was the first time that I was on set since pre-COVID. And I compared my first like bigger role, which was in a Lifetime movie. And I was so anxious and insecure, not rooted in my identity as a daughter of God. And I feel like seeing in the last few years, like what God has worked in me, and then being on set again, an even bigger production, and then just feeling like so much peace of like, I belong here. And also then I was in a place where I did my scene and I was about like a voice creeped in and I was like, oh, I could have done better. And I was like, no. And I shut it off right away. And I was like, I prepared for this. God opened the door. Like whatever's meant to be will be. And I like stopped that chatter right away in a way that honestly, even a year ago, I probably wouldn't have done. Wow. And then I walk back to where all the other actors are sitting, and 3 of the other girls that had a scene as well were sitting there beating themselves up, saying, I wish I could have done it again, like da-da-da. And I was like, no, ladies, like you're beautiful, you're talented. Whatever's meant to be will be. Like this is a positive step for all of us. We're on set. Like, and I found myself able to encourage them authentically from that place of being rooted in my identity. And I just saw like the intentionality of God's timing as well, because I always felt like with my acting career, I'm like, well, I just want to be a light and all these things. But God really showed me like, well, in order for you to be a light, like you need to be unshakable in like who you are. So then you can be in a place of confidence and like victory to be able to then encourage other people. So that was a bit of a tangent, but it is like, I think once you really step into that, not only like does God prepare you for what he's called to, but he also then shifts your desires of your heart to be more aligned with his. And then like you said, sometimes that means your trajectory shifting a little bit, or honestly, even this podcast, like that wasn't something that I thought I was going to do, but God just like spoke to me about it. And I just, sometimes it hasn't been the way that I thought it was going to look, which I actually want to ask you about, because there is, you recently posted a reel, again, getting back to the stalking thing in my preparation, but you posted a reel about like our standards of success and pursuing something that's on our heart, and then being like, well, this isn't what I thought it would be. Like, God, why is it not successful? I actually quoted you because I knew I would butcher it. But you said, what if you're still supposed to do that thing that's on your heart, even if the results or the success level isn't what you think qualifies it as meaningful or qualifies it as validation that you're supposed to do it? Maybe you're supposed to do it because you have your own mark on it, your own imprint to make in the world, and your success level is whatever God has decided it to be. And I feel like this podcast is like a perfect example of that. When I first started, like, my numbers were embarrassing. I was like, no one listens to this. And like, you get to the point, and like the podcast industry, they're like 10,000 downloads per episode is what you need for advertising. And I was like, very far from that. So I was like, wow, I really doubted like if I was having an impact and if I was doing what I was supposed to. But anyway, I would love to hear kind of like your journey of how you even got to the place where you could be making a reel like that, where you've seen that in your life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many phases and so many things that I felt like God was calling me to do, where I then question it, because I am numbers driven. I'm results driven. Yeah. I like to see results. And I think that's part of how God made me. And then I also think that is how the enemy can get a foothold. Yep. You know, it's like with anything, a gifting that we have can also be used against us if we idolize it. Absolutely. So it really just always comes down to obedience, and just doing the thing that God called us to do, regardless of the results. And there's so many things I can talk about on this. And one of them is, I think like we're like, okay, I'm not going to get caught up in results. And so then we're like, all right, I want to make sure I have a pure heart and like my motives are pure. Yeah. And so then when you start feeling like, okay, I'm getting too results driven, or this is not about God anymore. This is about self. This is about numbers. Then we can kind of get scared of our own impurities, like scared of ourselves. I do that where I'm like, this is consuming my mind too much. Like Instagram. I'm not like, say I felt like God was telling me to post a video every day. And then I start like really getting into how many people are viewing it and how many comments and how many shares. And then I get like defeated by the fact that there's not enough numbers or shares. And then I realize, oh, I'm getting too wrapped up in it. So I'm just going to stop. And so we stopped doing the thing for two reasons. One, we're not getting the results. And two, we realize it's consuming us too much and our motives have been tainted. And so I just want to speak to that. And this comes back to the perfectionism thing, which perfectionism can look different. And we don't realize that perfectionism can look like us wanting to be so good. You know, like I just want to be good for God. I want to have a good heart. I want to be doing this the right way. And if I'm not doing this the right way, then I shouldn't do it. And so we just kind of quit, you know, and there's this verse in Philippians that where Paul talks about how people preach the gospel for different reasons. Some people, he says that some people preach the gospel out of rivalry, jealousy, and for selfish ambition. Wow. And then he says, but why does it matter? What matters is that the gospel is being preached. And so that is such a good reminder, even for me, like when I start like getting in my head, or I am afraid of myself. I'm afraid of my own self. I'm afraid that when I start She Gathers, my women's ministry up again, that I'm going to be like, how many people were there? And I'm gonna get caught up in my performance and how big it is. You know, which is a self thing. And I'm afraid of that. But I also don't want that to stop me from doing the work. And I think the enemy will use that thing like, oh, look at you. Like you're getting caught up in the wrong thing. That means you're not a good person. That means you're not a mature believer. That means you're not spiritual enough. And he'll use that thing to take you out. When actually it's like, we need to stop getting so caught up in like our head and rationalizing and like, am I doing the right thing? Like it's that's making it too much about us. You know what I mean? Exactly. It's like, no, what did God tell you to do? And just do it.
Totally.
And you're going to wrestle. But your wrestlings don't make you weak. They make you wise.
Wow. That's incredible. And it's funny because for the longest time I would make this joke, and I still make this joke, that like my autobiography one day is going to be, am I doing this right? Because
that's so cute. I love that. Oh my God. That's so good.
You heard it here first. No. But genuinely it was like, when I look back, and this fits in with the perfectionism, like I just wanted to do a good job. And it was from a pure-hearted place. Right. And even just like I said in the beginning, when I first moved to LA, like doors weren't opening for me for acting right away. And it was very much a slow burn, but like I look back and see God's like consistency and faithfulness, but like in the way that like only he could have prepared me with his timing of things. And to a place where like I did have to fully surrender that, because I'm no longer idolizing my acting career, but I would doubt like, okay, well, why are these doors not opening? Like, did I really hear you right? And I think when you look at the first like sin in all of like humanity and in the Bible was coming from the place of like Adam and Eve in the garden, and the enemy making them think like, did God really say that? And I think that that's one of the ways in which the enemy tries the most to make us get off course, is doubting what God really said. Whether it be about like our calling and what he told us to do. Again, getting back to seeing results, like, well, I'm not seeing the results of pursuing this acting career. I'm not seeing the results of doing this podcast. I'm not. Well, then I'm disqualified, or I'm not hearing right. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in that it stops us, and like perfectionism leads to procrastination or defeating or quitting. And so I just want to share also, and this isn't to like puff myself up, but like I still don't, the numbers of this podcast, if you're listening right now, thank you. But like they're not where I want it to be, you know, and it's not where like the industry would look and be like, okay, like we'll advertise on your podcast. And like by those standards, it's not quote unquote successful. But my current job that I have that is providing me so much stability and making me learn a lot more and just empowering me to do the things that God has called me to do, came from my boss knowing that I had a podcast and knew how to produce it end to end. That's one bit. The other bit is like it's opened up to a lot of like movers and shakers in the human trafficking industry, anti-human trafficking. I always like to clarify that. But,
good clarification.
But like, and that's equipping me to further step into like that part of what God has called me to do. So all this to say, like, you never know the ways which God is working behind the scenes, but I've already seen how some of those things are connecting. So if anyone's listening, like, I just want to say, like, keep going. Even if you're not seeing those results, like, I do feel like in retrospect, I can look at a lot of things in my life and seeing the through line, how God has connected the dots in retrospect. Have you seen that?
No, I think that's so good. Like, just how his results might look different than what we think the results were supposed to look like.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, and that's really just what it is. And as you're talking, it makes me think of Noah when he's building the ark.
Yeah.
You know, like he must have felt crazy.
Yeah.
But he built that thing for a long time. Everyone thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
Like no one believed him. And so I would love to talk to Noah one day and just be like, how did you know that you were supposed to keep going? Because it's not like God came back and was like, yes, keep going.
Yeah.
You know, like he heard him one time.
Yeah.
And he just kept going from there. And so I think that's just where faith comes in. The Bible also says that without faith, we can't please God.
Yeah.
And faith is action.
Yeah.
Regardless of how we feel.
Totally. Yeah. Well, with that, and even talking about Noah and like kind of like building without seeing the fruit of it and doing it where like no one else believes in you. Again, getting back to the stalker mode for the Kristen Dalton Wolfe show, when I was watching like your trailer for that, you said something that was so powerful and resonated with me. And you said, through tearful nights and quiet suffering, I realized that all along I was becoming exactly who I'm made to be. Which relates to what we're saying. Like, we don't even know the ways in which God is building us into who we were made to be and connecting those dots. But also that tearful nights and quiet suffering, like, I so relate to that. I feel like that was, like, the last, like, so many years and just, like, being and pursuing this thing that that like that's what God has called you to do, but you don't necessarily see the light at the end of the tunnel. Waiting on unanswered prayers and feeling unseen and alone is just such an alienating place. So I love that you bring light to that. And I would love if you could just speak to like what that looked like in your life and how you learned about God's heart during those seasons.
Yeah. Well, the first, I guess, scene or series of tearful nights that come to mind, because you know there's lots of different phases of those tearful nights and what they're from, but the first one is when I was living in LA and I was believing for my husband, and I'm a fairy tale girl, I'm a romance girl, and I believe in like, you know, God's best. But I was starting to question it and doubt it. And so this was like probably the first few years living out here. And it was like my early to mid 20s. And this is the first time in my life where I started like going out and going to the club and like girls' nights, you know, and it was so fun. It was, you know, I didn't do that stuff in college. I didn't do it like in my early 20s. And I was like, wow, like this is what I was missing out on in college, but it's a good thing because otherwise I would not have made A's, you know? So we had fun, but I would come home to my apartment at the end of the night and cry. I remember like just feeling I was like, this is not it. You know, like this is so unfulfilling. And I'm a very like, I need to feel like connection and meaning and purpose and like, why are we doing this, you know? And I just remember being like, I want to come home to my person. I want to come home to my husband. Like, I want us to be doing this together. So just those tearful nights of, are my expectations too high? You know, am I crazy? Like, does this like Prince charming guy like really exist? And so what I learned about God's heart and all of that is Yes, he does. He gives you the desires of your heart, like for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think, he just wants us to trust him through it. Yeah. And so I was dating this guy that was not God's best, but he was like kind of close, you know. Mm-hmm. We were really good friends. We had a great relationship. He was like good. It was a good thing. And this is just, I think, when it comes to things in your life where there's a good thing versus a God thing.
Yeah.
And I was wrestling so much, like, do I stay with this good thing because maybe that thing that vision that God has given me is not real.
Yeah.
Like maybe I really have been misled by Disney.
Yeah.
You know,
it comes back to
maybe
Disney.
all that's true. Like maybe I really have been misled, you know, maybe I am crazy. But I just decided one day, I read this devotion. The title of it was Do It Afraid. Wow. And I realized like I would never know that if I'd missed out on God's best if I stayed in the good thing, you know? So I decided I broke up with him.
Wow.
Out of faith. Yeah. And I was so scared because it was good.
Totally.
You know, but I didn't feel adored and treasured in the relationship. And that's something that that's who I am. Like I need to feel adored. So, broke up with him out of faith and then met Kris, my Prince Charming, like 3 months later.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's inspiring.
And then we got engaged in 6 months and married 6 months later. So.
Wow. And now you guys have 3 beautiful children that I'm obsessed with.
Thank you.
Which also leads me to like, okay, so you have this beautiful, amazing family. You're such a powerhouse speaker, author. You have your TV show. You have these flourishing ministries, like, and you do it with so much grace. But then you also
on the outside, Kirsten.
Yes, but then what I do, well, so you also, what I really admire about you, like when you do speak, you are so vulnerable and honest of like, it's on the outside, you know? Yeah. And I think it's really easy to get overwhelmed, especially when it's like, oh, these are all blessings, you know, like you're living such a fruitful life. How do you, this is coming from, please tell me, because I feel this way all the time of being overwhelmed, trying to balance a lot of things. Like, how do you not succumb to that overwhelm and just kind of keep it all in check? It's a loaded question, I know.
Yeah. Okay. So, stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths and walk in them, and you will find rest for your soul.
Wow.
So last year, I almost died from COVID pneumonia and respiratory failure, and I was pregnant, 7 months pregnant. And I would say that like I was in a state of overwhelm and like pushing through, pushing past my limits. And I think that's a big part of why it progressed as far as it did. I was just like, my immune system was low. I was like just broken down, not taking good care of myself, not resting, didn't have soul rest. And so when I was in the hospital, I was just like praying and had a lot of time to reflect. And I made a decision that I was going to live from a place of soul rest from that point forward. And so I just started living life different. And so that verse was a big one. And basically what that's saying is like, well, first of all, you got to prioritize in each season because we're not called, people say like, how do you do it all? You're not supposed to do it all. You're supposed to do your call. And that's going to look different in different seasons. Yep. And so for me, that was really, that it's been such a struggle since becoming a mom because like yes, motherhood is a calling, but I have callings outside of that.
Right.
And so doing all of it is, it is overwhelming. You can't, I can't.
Yeah.
And I don't have full-time help and I can't afford full-time help.
Right.
So after that stint in the hospital, I was like, okay, like what is this going to look like? How are we going to do this? And So that was the verse, stand at the crossroads and look, ask for the ancient paths and walk at them and you have rest for your soul. So I'm like, okay, what are the ancient paths? And so then there's this other scripture that came up that's like, and I will settle the woman in her home as a happy mother of children.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, a happy mom? Like you can be happy mom? So I'm like, I want to figure out like how to be a happy mom. So I felt like God was really calling me in this last year to prioritize motherhood, which meant I needed to lay down some other things. So I pulled back from my women's ministry, pulled back on my coaching schedule, said goodbye to all my babysitters and help. And it was just like, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to get like, I want to be settled in my home as a happy mother. So it's like settled in my soul and in my mind and like, no, this is a calling and I need to like see it as that, see it as valuable versus like inconvenient. And so the answer to your question is, how do we do this? Like, how do we do the thing and not be overwhelmed? And it's like, first of all, you're not supposed to do it all. You're supposed to do your call. Right. Second, seasons look different. So prioritize your callings in however God is asking you to do it in the season. Yeah. And realize that those seasons will lift, and they will change and transition, and be ready for it and be looking for it and always getting back to God and be like, all right, God, now I feel like you're asking me to put something else on my plate. So what is it? And how do I do it? Because we don't want to like go revert back to like the overwhelm. It's so tempting because that is our culture that we live in. Everyone's like glorified for, well, she's the mom of 4 kids and she's slaying it, making $1 million, like doing whatever. And also having a full friend life and thriving marriage. And it's like, so that's why we feel like we have to do everything. And that's just that's not good for our souls. And like, there's this quote that says, if you don't take a Sabbath, sickness will be your Sabbath. And so that was true for me. Yeah, same. And it's like, you just have to live your life where you have that margin that's built in. Yeah. And your relationship with God has to be number one. And so if you're feeling frantic in your soul, that means priorities are out of alignment. Yep. And you're in like proving mode. Yep. Yeah.
So good. And I also, I wasn't nearly as sick as you were. But recently, like I've had a lot of over the years, like chronic health things. And, I went to a lot of different doctors that were like, okay, here's the antibiotic. Okay, here's this. And like putting these Band-Aids on it. And then I went back to like, all right, going into like striving mode and just like pushing through and not listening to my body. But our bodies are so intelligent. Like God designed us in a very specific way. And when you have all these chronic, quote unquote, random health issues, it's your body trying to tell you that something's wrong. And I finally, what was like life-changing for me in this last year is I went to a functional medicine practitioner who looks at everything holistically and everything as interconnected because these issues are. And she did like all these deep dive tests on me and found like my adrenal glands are like completely drained and out of whack. Like my thyroid is completely out of whack. Like my hormonal issues that I had over years are results of that. And then like that affects my GI and there's like high levels of like heavy metal toxicity in my body and like all these things that are what she says it comes down to the result of chronic stress in my life. And that was just so like my wake up call because I'm like, actually the only way that I'm going to heal myself or let like God heal me and let my body heal itself is if I rest. Yeah. Even like, this is going to sound crazy, but like, I would eat like most of my meals in the car because I was like on the go, just like, and my doctor was like, well, you have like a lot of like these GI issues. Like your body is in fight or flight mode when you're eating, not in rest or digest. Like you need to like relax before you eat your meals and like actually like breathe and like bless your food and just like let it nourish you. And so that's been a like really big thing for me in the last few months is like slowing down long enough to eat my meal, which sounds ridiculous, but like that genuinely was like the lifestyle that I had created for myself.
Right.
Which then led me to really assessing like, okay, where am I making these margins in my life? Like taking a Sabbath, taking time to eat my meal and not like working while I eat. And so that was a bit of a tangent, but like that has so been my journey as well. It's because it's like I see it as a blessing. Like God has given me a lot of passion for a lot of different things and a lot of like different skill sets to do them. And I feel so grateful for that. So I'm like, again, getting back to like, I want to do good. So it's like, I want to do everything. But like God has really been teaching me, okay, like we're laying the foundation here. Like you've started some of these things, but then in some seasons, I'm going to ask you to like lay that down. And so this is like I'm re-recording new episodes for the podcast, but for the last like 6 to 8 months, I was not doing that. And I felt like a failure during that time, honestly. Yeah. And I had to just lay that down and be like, no, this is not the season for that. And I'm going to let just like God speak to me when it is. And now here we are. But everything you shared was like so resonating with me because it is like, it's a constant wrestle. Like you're never going to get to perfection with it. And it is truly like just learning how to rest on God to tell you like what this season is about and like what your call is for that.
You know, what really helped me with all of this and the temptation to like hustle and do a bunch of amazing, glamorous things is to remember and think about like, what is the goal? Like, why do we want to make a certain amount of money? Why do we want to grow our business to a certain level? Why do we have our goals? And the goal is so we can enjoy our life.
Right? Isn't that so ironic?
Yeah. But then we like do all these things and we're not enjoying our life. So I was like, oh, okay, like that's the end goal. So what if I just start doing that right now?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so simple, but so profound.
Yeah. Like I don't need to do all that stuff to enjoy my life.
Yeah.
And actually I'm the one who just unlocked the secret and everyone else is hustling to enjoy their life, but they're not enjoying their life.
Yeah.
You know?
It's so funny.
It's the key to your beauty too. It's
totally.
Like it's like making people look haggard. It's draining. It's like, no. Keep your youth and your glow and your radiance and your beauty, but taking some stuff off your plate.
Exactly.
And owning it. Because the thing is, if you take the stuff off your plate and you're stressed about it, like you were, and you were feeling guilty and like a failure, it doesn't count.
It doesn't. Exactly.
If you feel guilty while you're resting, it's not resting.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, which is a whole other topic in and of itself. Right. No, it's funny though, because God's been trying to tell me this for a long time. It's just taken me a bit to hear. But I remember like years ago, my acting coach was like, Kirsten, you're not enjoying your life. Like you're so focused on being a good actor that you're not enjoying your life, which is ironic because as an actor, you're supposed to be like playing a person and like drawing on life experiences to create a real human being. And if you're not living your life, how can you have life experiences to draw upon to be a really dynamic actor? And like he said too, like don't let acting be the reason why you don't enjoy your life. Like so many actors are like, well, I'll be happy when I'm like on a series, but then you're on the series and it's like, well, now I need to stay on the series. And like, and there's just, if you don't get to the point, whatever it is, whether you're an actor or a doctor, like whatever it is, like if you don't get to the point where you can enjoy your life right now, you never will, because there's always going to be another next thing.
Yeah, the Bible says it's God's gift to us that we would enjoy our work. So I feel like it's almost like a battle technique for us to have fun.
Yeah. Totally.
You know, because the enemy will use all those good things and like our purposes and our dreams to hate ourselves because we feel like failures, to stress us out so much that we start drinking a lot or we start coping with things that hurt us. And the enemy is like, ha, 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 you know, and it's like, no, but if we're having fun, then he can't, like those things won't have a place.
Yeah, totally. Well, this kind of reminds me of, I saw this sermon a few weeks ago by Bill Johnson from Bethel, and it was probably one of the best sermons I've ever seen.
Oh, wow.
And he talks about hope and joy in it, but he talks about it, what is there's hope, like our culture defines hope, but like what is biblical hope? And he says, joyful anticipation of good. Hope gives you permission to enjoy the emotional benefits of an unanswered prayer before it ever happens. Hope is the environment that faith grows in. And it's funny because I feel like a lot of like secular like mentality is like, manifest, like raise your frequency and it's like saying basically what that is saying, but like in secular terms. And it's like what manifesting, right, is like what actually, if you're putting your hope like in God and like the things that he's promised you and knowing that like that will come to pass, but also your value right now is like inherently so valuable, whether you ever achieve that thing or not. And like God does want you to enjoy your life now. And like if you never, ever, ever did another thing for him, like he would still love you just as much. That was so radical for me and like brings me to tears when I think about it, because I think like so many times I'm like, I believe that, quote unquote, but then like my actions don't match it because like I genuinely, to the perfectionism thing, like it's coming from a place of like, I just want to be valued and accepted, but like I already am. And just like reminding myself of that daily is like such a wrestle. And it's something that I have to do to stay in that place of worthiness. But then when I do that and when I'm in that joyful place is when good things start to come to me. It's crazy. And then that's where the world would be like, oh, well, your frequency was high and you're manifesting that. And I'm like, no, like I'm just living in the identity of like who God actually says I am. And I'm inviting his goodness to come into my life because of that. Even this job that I just mentioned, like that I recently booked, it was like the busiest day. I was getting ready to fly out the next morning. I was like, this is ridiculous. I have so much on my plate, but like, this is exciting. I'm not going to get stressed out about it. I worked all day. I had to go film this audition really quickly. I'd gotten it in the morning. I hope my manager's not listening. I didn't look at my audition because I was just like, I don't have time to look at it. I was looking at it like on my way to go film it for the first time, like reading the lines at stoplights. But I was in this place of like joy of like how ridiculous it is. It was that I like was so unprepared because that's so not me.
Right.
And I just was like, I just kept, this is going to sound like silly, but I just kept like repeating, like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And then I filmed it. I had so much fun. Like I was cracking up. Like I couldn't stop laughing because I just had that joy of like God, you know?
You were like in the supernatural cloud of
totally.
Holy Spirit joy.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
So cool.
It just like surpassed, again, like it's the joy and peace that surpasses all understanding. Anyway, I booked that. It's the first thing I've booked in like since pre-COVID. It was my first like network credit, which is like the hardest to get.
Wow.
And it's like a few lines. It's nothing like crazy. And the cool thing is I went to the Warner Brothers lot to do the fitting, and I used to work on the Warner Brothers lot, like for an event company, working as a server and like taking the trash out. And like, I literally felt like Emma Stone in La La Land. 'Cause I was like on the lot, like looking at the actors and like, but like, God, like you told me like, I'm supposed to be an actor. Like, why am I not here for acting? And I remember like getting back to Tearful Nights, like getting in my car and like crying, like, why am I not here for acting? Like I want to be here for acting. Like, I don't want to be moving heavy equipment and throwing people's trash out. And when I came for the fitting a few weeks ago, I parked in the same lot that I used to park at when I would pray those prayers. And I realized I like had a flashback to those prayers in my car. And I was like, this is the first time I'm here for acting.
So why do you feel like God had you there to begin with? Because you said that you love being able to see the through line. So what was your aha moment?
Of before or after?
Of why he had you there. Like what happened in you between that time when you were throwing people's trash away and then booking the show? That
like, I was, even the way that I booked the show, like I was just saying, was like from a place of not striving and from a place of, again, like I kind of went on a tangent here, but coming back to like what Bill Johnson said of like, hope is the joyful anticipation of good. And like creating an environment that faith can grow in.
That's so good.
I was so joyful filming that audition, getting there, like afterward, I was just like, genuinely my strength was coming from God, and it always does. But like in that, I really had to rely on him because of the circumstances of the day. And then the fact that that's the first one that I booked, like not even like there was no striving associated, and getting back to like what we've been talking about of like laying things down and not letting ourselves getting overwhelmed. Really what that equates to is not striving and letting yourself rest. And so I think God
doing it from a place of rest. Yeah.
And so I think like God was trying to show me that. And then like his intentionality also of like, it could have been at any lot, and it was that lot, and they had me park in the same parking lot. And then because I had that, like I shared earlier, when I was on set, like I was not doubting if I belong here. I wasn't doubting like my worthiness. I wasn't doubting if I was capable of doing the job. Like I had so much confidence. And I had that one moment where like the enemy tried to sneak in, but then I shut it down right away, which I even a year ago would not have been able to do. So I think like with answering your question of like why God had me there and why also like it took so long was to like really refine that character so that it wasn't about me necessarily being there and having a step in my acting career. It was like there to like be encouraging to then the other women that were beating themselves up. And the last like set of that caliber that I was on was probably in 2019, and I was like one of the leads of this movie, and I had gotten that. I submitted myself for it on Actors Access. I like was so striving, like I booked it, and then I got there and I was so insecure. I was so like in imposter syndrome. I remember every night going home and crying because I was like, I'm screwing this up. Like, this is my one shot. I'm screwing it up. Like, no one's ever going to cast me again. I'm terrible. Like, I'm not a good actor. Like, why am I here? Like, maybe I wasn't supposed to do this. And then I ended up watching the movie and it was like, fine. But that experience was so unenjoyable. Yeah. And then seeing now where I am and like leaving set the other day, I was like, bubbling with so much joy because I was standing, again, kind of bringing it full circle, like standing in that place of like my identity and who God says I am. And even if I screwed up, like in the who knows, like the show might come out and I like might have done a terrible job, but like genuinely being able to be in that place of being like, I don't really care about the outcome because I know who I am. So.
Yeah, it sounds like the movie where you were the lead. You had like all of that imposter syndrome and doubt happening because you had like strived to even get the part.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but then the second one, you didn't strive to get the part. You just had fun.
Exactly.
It comes back to having fun.
Yes.
And you can have fun when you know God loves you. Yeah. And you're already secure.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So that was like a long-winded way of like saying yes, and this is like an example of that.
Yeah.
But
no, it's helpful to flesh out though. So it helps people and even me be able to see how God is working in our life, you know?
Exactly. And I think like we have time for like one more question. Okay. So there's so many things I want to talk to you about. But I do feel like just winding it down, like you have been through obviously like a lot of different seasons and like God has walked you through so many different things. If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
Relax and keep going.
So good.
Yeah. So basically like don't vacillate in the self-doubt and questioning and like stopping and starting because you're scared that you don't have what it takes or that people are going to judge you or that you're not ready yet. Just keep doing the thing, like stay in the game. Stay consistent and persistent. But be relaxed doing it. Like calm down. Just
so
relax.
Good. Yeah. That's, yes, amen, copy and paste. Okay, I lied. I have one more question for you. So obviously the name of this podcast is Imperfect.
Yeah.
As we've touched on today, like perfectionism is something I've dealt with like my whole life. And I've tried to, really overcome by stepping in that place of like my identity, like, and that's what qualifies me, not like me being perfect or performance driven. Yeah. But then I realized the things that I've been insecure about like my whole life, actually, when I learn how to embrace them as imperfections, they're the things that then have connected me to other people and have like empowered me to build like a better connection with people. And I know that like you're so vulnerable in when you're speaking, and that really does, like, I've seen how it just like binds people together and like draws them to you and your community. So with that, what is the imperfection that you are most proud of?
Oh my gosh, Kirsten. I struggle with this question because I can't say that I'm proud of my like anger or I'm proud that like I drink too much sometimes. Hello. Yeah. Or that I'm proud that I like to cuss and I literally cannot stop. I've been praying about stopping cussing since I was in high school, and it's still an issue. So I'm just like, Lord, are you never going to deliver me from that? Like, how am I supposed to like preach from a platform or a stage when I low-key struggle with cussing like so bad?
You're so funny.
But, and then he just reminds me that Paul always had the thorn in his side, and he's like, my grace is sufficient for you. And so maybe all along I've been looking for deliverance, and God is like, you're never going to be delivered. Like, you're just going to have to rely on my grace every single day. Like, that's why there's new morning mercies. So I know that's going to encourage somebody who's been struggling and they're like, I cannot get breakthrough in this area. Yeah. So there's that. And, okay. So I was like, yeah, I'm not proud of these things, girl. But one thing that I think is frustrating to me about myself, or can be, is the fact that, I'm introverted but I'm in spaces and in a position where like I need to be social. Yeah.
Which is so funny because you're like the most social. Well, I'm also an introvert, but it's like you seem like an extrovert to me. Yeah. And everyone always says that, but it's like, no, it's sometimes you have to get your energy from yourself. Anyway, continue. Yeah. Well, it's funny because you're not who I think of.
Yeah. Like an introvert doesn't, you can be friendly and have great social skills and be an introvert, which I am. Yeah. But I just get really like wiped out, especially by small talk. OMG. Oh yeah. But like, you gotta be able to do a small talk in like a crowd when you're in certain positions like we are, you know? So, it can be really draining. And I need to like leave social settings like sooner than my husband, unless I can like hold off with one person and get into a deep therapy session in a corner, then like I can stay all night. Yeah. That's so funny. But that has connected me, like you're talking about, with a lot of my coaching clients, because a lot of them are performers and achievers and leaders, and they feel like something is wrong with them because they're like, I can't go as long as this other girl. I need to like shut down. I'm not as bubbly as this other person. And so it helps me be like, I know exactly how you're feeling. Like, just so you know, that does not mean that you're not equipped or called to be on the platform, or to have a microphone in your hand, or to be a communicator at all. Yeah. So to help you understand, like, this is how God made you. Right. And you need to own it versus feel bad about it. Absolutely. Or push through it or try to pretend like it's like, no, actually just honor the fact that I need to leave now. It's time for me to go. Like, I'm shutting down. The light switch just turned off. And so I'm leaving, you know, and just own it instead of like pushing through because you feel like you're going to look mean or look like unfriendly or, break social norms because you need to like get some space. Exactly. So,
no, that's so good. And I think like, I know it's a tricky, what are you proud of in that? But it's like, that's the heart of it, is like those things that for a while we've struggled with. Oh, if I could only just be better in this, but it's like, no, actually that has allowed you to connect with people and also lead you to taking care of yourself and not burning out, like we said. So, okay. Well, where can listeners catch up with you, find you, connect with you, all the things?
At Kristen J. Dalton. You can just go to at Kristen J. Dalton on Instagram and then find everything from there.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay, great. I'll also tag it in the show notes so everyone can find you. But thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was such a good combo.
Yeah.
We had fun.
That was the intention and we did it.
We did it.
And thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.